Welcome to the fourth workshop, the Lessons Learned Guide. So here's just a brief overview of the agenda today. We're going to look at the results of the pilot templates presented by the Knowledge Partners. Briefly, we're going to go through the outstanding templates, what we haven't received yet. It's going to be a brief break, and then we're going to look at the main lessons learned. That will look at an overview of the other deliverables as well and try and integrate that into this. Then we will be planning for the next steps, writing the lessons learned guide, and open discussion, wrap up, and key takeaways. We will be working on a Miro board also, so that is in the chat, the link to that, so you can work on that as you like. Now, for the pilot sites, we're going to start with FMN. We have preparation and planning, pilot implementation and operation, and I'm going to pass over to them. Oh, nobody's there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm
okay. Sorry, I came quick on you. So.
Ahmed is also around, but yes,
would you like to wait a second?
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Yes, let's do this, Karina. How would you like to organize it?
I can share my screen with the Miro board because then everyone can see it. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, so here we can see the Miro board. We have a lot of stickers. And yeah, we try to organize this in the same way as the templates themselves. So like challenges and weaknesses are in red, which are the negative points according to the Miro board, and some positives. And yeah, some key takeaways, but also overall important information. So starting with preparation and planning, the most important downfalls were, first of all, the fact that car traffic in dense urban areas made it very difficult for shuttles to operate among all pilot sites, basically. So either the closure of roads was needed or selection of roads with lighter traffic. Also, the changes between the first recordings and final programmation could be problematic. So the moment the road is selected and was mapped out, if there were some issues arising, it was quite difficult to deviate from initial plan and was causing delays. Communication can be difficult, especially since every stakeholder involved had their own goals and their own regulations and procurements. So that's why actually good communication is a key, which I'm going to talk about later as a key finding of the section. If good videos and pictures of the route were available beforehand, so before the shuttle was placed in the area, then the successful preparation could be somewhat guaranteed, because then a lot of obstacles were visible, and it was visible what could be potential issues. So the feasibility study was better quality. Obviously, involvement of regulators is always positive. This point of adoption of national pilot initiatives also connects to one of the key findings, is the fact that if the project can be aligned or fitted within local initiatives towards autonomous mobility, or let's say somewhat aligned with the local aims and goals for future mobility, then it's way easier to also involve the stakeholders start the pilot preparations. So an alignment with local guidelines is a key, and also it also ensures good support and collaboration. Also later on in the actual implementation and operation, I'm also going to talk about this a bit, is the fact that studying possible changes in the route is really important. And out of that, it's either there should be some kind of a buffer of extra time for some changes and constructions and road closures, or an extra vehicle should be provided, because there were always some kind of drawbacks and issues which caused delays. So it's either taken into account and studying possible changes or being prepared for vehicle replacement in case if something happens. Now continuing, yeah, as I said, construction works and blockages can delay the process. Basically, all of these points connect to the fact that feasibility studies should be way more detailed and contain more time for it. Identification of stakeholders and direct communication with them was quite helpful for the raising awareness, but also drawing attention. And the more stakeholders were communicated with and involved, the better the feedback was in the end. Also, as we heard from our previous meetings, when a good quality video was available for the users of the shuttles, or when the users could see onboard units and the applications that shuttle used, they had a very positive feedback and they felt more comfortable. So actually providing the users and stakeholders involved with this direct information of what's happening in a shuttle, how is it driving, what kind of technology they use, it really helps in increasing the trust and raising awareness. So that's very important. Also looking out for possible problems before the shuttle setup was an essential key point. So for example, checking the lower speed limit of the roads, avoiding national roads, avoiding high-speed car traffic, etc. So the better the feasibility study of the route is, the better the operation will be in the future, which is quite an obvious conclusion, but very important to note. So we had one question because we were discussing this with Amit, is that out of the conclusions of the templates, we can conclude that either the road for the shuttle, at least for the first pilot implementation, should be selected based on the pedestrian preferences, so like maybe lower speed, less traffic road, or should we still select very busy roads but also face complications but be prepared for those complications? So these are two different directions we can go in terms of recommendation. It's either going, let's say, a bit of an easy direction and selecting an easy route, or selecting a very complicated route, but spending more time, which is going to also cost a bit more money on feasibility study, on preparations, maintenance, repairs, etc., etc. So here we can derive into two sub recommendations for route selection. Also, yeah, we found out that cold weather affects battery time. So actually, weather assessment is important. Yeah, an overall conclusion of this section is that route should be selected considering its fitting to shuttle operation requirements. And the fact that preparation analysis is very important. Also, especially formalizing everything. So all the agreements with all the partners involved. So formalizing them with contracts, repairs, maintenance contracts, cost contracts, etc. is really important because yeah, it was seen with the examples. Then the operation can run more smoothly and less time is wasted on fixing certain issues when they arise. What else? Yeah, this is a bit chaotic because it was more like a brainstorm. Yeah, formalizing agreements. Also, the way that the local authorities can be convinced to implement this shuttle pilot is first by connecting it to their local goals and aims in terms of future mobility, what I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, but also by emphasizing the road safety, zero emissions, etc., etc. And that should be shown in actual numbers or examples to actually emphasize the benefit for them specifically. And this is how the stakeholders can be more involved and committed, and yeah, the collaboration would be way better. In terms of financing, yeah, cities expect the service to be way cheaper compared to normal shuttles. And also realization becomes more expensive if stakeholders do not have prior experience or prior knowledge in shuttle implementation, because then there is a lot of drawbacks and setbacks in terms of time money, etc., etc. So it's important to first raise awareness and also provide stakeholders with necessary information so they are somewhat prepared. Also, continuous funding is essential for maintenance, especially. It's important to find synergies between projects and between the project's aims and goals. Again, coming back to municipal goals or local authorities' goals, in order to see for potential funding options in the future. Then coming to our second part, shall I continue now, or Ahmed, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking. So overall, what we see is that the shuttle's technical performances will not always connect to people's needs necessarily. Sometimes there are certain connections to be made that would fit perfectly within a public transport operation, but cannot be done. Is technically not feasible yet. Which is of course a shame, but unfortunately the reality as where we stand right now. And the second thing what we notice is, I think Karina said it very well, is really be prepared properly by organizing the right stakeholders with the right agreements, formalizing those agreements, and then from there onwards continue and start doing the actual implementation. That's what I wanted to add as well.
Yeah, it's very well put, because if rushing through the initial phase, then actually no time is saved, because then more time is wasted when certain issues arise while the operation is going. So very good, very concrete feasibility study, and yes, stakeholder mapping and engagement is definitely essential for a smooth operation. In terms of pilot implementation and operation, multiple pilot sites emphasize the fact that it's actually hard to prepare implementation routes according to all the requirements from local authorities. For example, getting right traffic signs to warn people, but also lowering speed limits can be problematic, and that's where a lot of issues might arise. So actually finding this synergy and alignment between what the shuttle pilot project team wants to do and what is actually possible on the road, it can be problematic. And yeah, shortage of drivers is definitely a problem, but also a shortage of actually trained operators that can also provide information for the users. Low speed is a problem, so acceleration and maximum speed from the users, which is also makes it difficult to convince users to hold on and sit due to low speed, but then people might get still hurt because of the braking or still high acceleration at some moments. Some obstacles on the roads require intervention, or for example, again, road constructions or unprecedented maintenance of vegetation around can also cause intervention and delays. Reparations, as I mentioned, it's either being really fully prepared with formalized repair and maintenance agreements with the shuttle providers, or actually preparing a second AV to replace the first one in case if repair is needed and there's not enough time or space to do it. Let me finish with the negative points here first. After that, I'm going to finish with the good ones. Repairs are sometimes not prioritized, which again connects to the fact that some agreements are not put on paper and formalized. That can be avoided. And challenging to find good storage for vehicle due to its height and due to the fact that this storage should be located next to the road. But if that is studied within the feasibility study, so the actual selection of the road with a specific set of criteria, and one of those criteria could be an actual setup of the storage facility and also space for repairs of the shuttle in case that's needed, then again, this challenge can be avoided in the future. Also, comparing from the good points, communication networks should be compared in order to find the best one, which will also alleviate challenges with finding a good spot for the antennas and a good connection. The fact that there are challenges with the low speed, they can be somewhat avoided if we are tackling specific target groups. So elderly or persons with reduced mobility, children, I put a question mark in the brackets because, yeah, that's not the outcome of the pilot test, but there was just a brainstorming idea. So if we are targeting these target groups, then lower speed might be more acceptable. So also selecting the route which actually targets these people, these target groups, can be beneficial for the shuttle operation and also for the positive feedback. Also identifying blind corners of the vehicle and actually connecting it to the vehicle operation on that specific route is also essential. Here, yeah, we added a question which we can discuss a bit later, that there was a suggestion for a solution to quickly avoid the moments when cellular connection is failed, but we can discuss that further to actually make a more concrete suggestion. Yeah, again, setting maintenance contracts is important. Again, formalizing repairs and maintenance. Storage must be the nearest site to the route as possible, just like Inverness suggested it could be on a campus area, on a campus site. So also route selection according to those requirements is essential. Yeah, the adequate training of drivers is necessary. Adjusting speeds to different users is necessary because also when using a shuttle, let's say in a high-speed zone or in a zone when quick transportation is needed, such as industrial zone, then yeah, the way of communicating and the way of targeting those users should be completely different rather than when we are targeting elderly or persons with reduced mobility, because for example, in industrial zone, slower speed is not as acceptable anymore. So that should definitely be thought through. Yeah, expecting more repair than usual. So always having buffer with time and costs and persons who can facilitate those repairs, or actually preparing more than one vehicle. So it's either one way or another, but this should definitely be taken into account. Things are moving. Yeah, and make an extending analysis of storage and power requirements, security, and also space for repairs, because I believe that was not mentioned explicitly, but it is indeed very important. It is all quite crucial. So I might have missed some points because there were a lot of the sticky notes, but I think the most important parts were mentioned. And Ahmed, if you have anything to add, please do that.
No, I think so far so good. These are mainly technical issues, of course, but implementation can also be part of. Implementation issues can also come up from stakeholder management, which is not going well, or maybe authorities that are holding your back or consider delays. But I think it really comes to proper preparation, and that is really the key here that we should focus on. Getting the preparation well with the proper steps outlined, and yeah, set it on paper such that pilot sites or future pilot sites can use it as a blueprint and say, okay, these are the steps and aspects that I need to look out for before we start doing any work. But the one thing that I wanted to add was the one with the note Avera what solution when the cellular connection failed. I know that the Navia vehicle, but I believe the EasyMile vehicle as well. These type of shuttles, they have redundant localization systems, which means that not only a GNSS connection is being used, but also other type of connections can be used, like the LiDAR positioning system. So what they do then is they make a map. They map the entire area. That area is being basically covered into a map that's saved on the vehicle's local computer, and the lidars, they check and compare constantly the real time the current environment with respect to the map. And if you combine that together with the GNSS system, then you have a redundant system of and a more accurate indication of where you are, of your localization. So that could be an option. And I guess that's what's meant here when you're talking about a solution that was quickly found to avoid this, not by forcing the shuttle to stop, but to find another. And you can set priorities with it if you want to. But I'm happy to hear how Avero, if this is what Avero meant.
Hello. Yes. Good morning. Yeah, the issue is that the shuttle could not operate if it loses simultaneously either the external services from a provider for a high precision location, and that service is provided by a VPN connection from the shuttle to the provider. And at the same time, it loses its own tracking of the satellites, of GNSS satellites constellation. So if both things occur, the vehicle stops. Although it has the information from LiDARs, it cannot operate safely. So what we did when it happened is that what we did was to move the shuttle to a location that the nearest location with free space without buildings because the path is very narrow. So we just move to the nearest one manually, wait for the shuttle to gather synchronized with the satellite constellation, and then execute a configuration to ignore the messages coming from the lack of external service from that provider. So in that situation, the vehicle could resume its operation.
How long did that take?
This was a quick fix. It was something that can be the driver. Our driver was instructed to do it. First time, of course, it's a surprise, but then he knows what locations it may happen, and what he does is then he enters in manual mode and moves the shuttle to the nearest location with the free space available and waits for the convergence of the tracking of the satellites by the GPS antenna in the vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this was our presentations of the lessons learned on those two aspects. I'm not sure, Mark, is there any time to ask questions, or should we just move on?
Well, we can certainly take a moment to discuss. The agenda is fluid. Otherwise, if nobody has questions, we're moving on to Daniel at Ruprecht with CCAM strategy and procurement and legal regulations. So if there's any questions, feel free to speak up. Nope. Okay.
All righty, thanks. Let me see, I think maybe it works better if I share my screen, just in case there's someone who hasn't opened the new report. Sorry, it's taking a little bit to load. But I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's start with the procurement and legal regulations phase and what I could collect from the lessons learned input collection templates. First, in relation to the vehicle and operation procurement, some of the main messages were along, first of all, there was one message on what to consider in terms of effort if you're running a different process for each of these procurements. So if you have a vehicle provider and then another company for vehicle operation that then you need to have to build a channel between those two providers basically, and to make sure that you're coordinating that that cooperation between two different companies in that case that will be doing the operation or the vehicle provision. So to make sure to consider realistically the effort to coordinate that, and also the procurement process, which can really take a long time and a lot of effort, and sometimes it hasn't been taken into account by some partners. Also in relation to the level of detail when discussing with the potential providers for this type of activities, the call to be very specific because there can be overly optimistic promises that can then lead to misunderstandings or issues in the work plan. So for instance, in relation to battery duration, one of our partners had the experience that this was rather too optimistic, and then they had to rearrange their schedule and route in terms of how to charge it, and maybe reduce operating time and so on. So the call for that type of issues was to, yes, be very detailed and specific when discussing the capabilities of the vehicles being selected, where it can drive, how often, and also to consider the environmental factors. So as mentioned already also by Karina before, the question of weather and how it affects, for instance, battery duration. Also that you're not only obtaining a vehicle, but also need to have adequate technical support. So having the procurer, the provider of the vehicle available for repairs, for maintenance, key, because otherwise it can really severely impact the demo with delays and maybe forcing partners to go ahead and do the repairs on their own. And some partners also found that there were not too many alternatives in the market actually to find suitable shuttles. So that also depends on which country you're located in, but given the volume of pilots that are currently being led, we found that on the one side there's also low availability from some vehicle procurers, and that can really challenge the work plan of a project. So this is something that should be taken into account as early as possible. And once the procurement process has been led, the importance was also highlighted to develop a very comprehensive agreement, a contract, an MOU with the vehicle provider and operator to make sure that there's a clear understanding of all the tasks, all the roles, liabilities, and expectations across the board. Make sure that you know who's going to provide training for the drivers, protocol for repair, support for maintenance, as mentioned, and so on. Some of the other main success factors mentioned have to do with, for the analysis, for the operation analysis and risk assessment, recommended to have a good set of visual material, filmed recordings and photos of the different sections of the track that was selected, GPS, track waypoints, knowing building height, street narrowness, the existence of different reference points in the infrastructure. So to really make sure that all is considered. It seems we have someone in the lobby. Okay, making sure that all is considered in terms of the limitations or specific conditions that the vehicle will have to go through in the route that it's selected. And then in relation to the maybe low number of alternatives for finding a vehicle provider, one option that a partner highlighted was, okay, you could consider just using an own converted vehicle that sometimes is available for some research entities, but then this can, of course, entail longer approval processes or permits if this vehicle has not been approved for and needs more tests. But of course, this then you have to only do once, and you have a vehicle available for your research. Just feel free to raise your hands or interrupt me if there's anything you want to complement, maybe the pilot partners in the call, if there's any questions also. Otherwise, I'll keep going with the next row where we have the legal requirements and permits. What were maybe the unexpected requirements and also the challenges that were faced. Some of the maybe not considered prior requirements have to do with, for instance, the minimum distance that the shuttle must respect when passing through our streets. So this comes into connection with what we just mentioned about having that measurement at hand when going through the route definition, but also vehicle and operator procurement process. Also that when doing the risk assessment for the operation and all of the different parameters need to be considered. So yeah, really the route storage, the infrastructure users, etc. As we mentioned, there can be differences in terms of the approval processes for a commercial vehicle that it's been already approved in other countries and widely tested, or more of a research vehicle, maybe something developed in-house and so on. So this needs to be considered in terms of the length of the process and the requirements. The importance of a national regulatory framework was highlighted in terms of the long-term process. So there was one of the cases where the authorization from the national side, from the ministry, would actually need to be done every year, as long as they haven't officially approved this type of vehicles for normal road traffic. So that also in terms of the iteration of this permit provision, and the fact that different parties actually need to provide authorization, and this doesn't always go in parallel, but actually one after another. So that should also be considered in terms of the time requirements. So in terms of those were the challenges faced, and in relation to the success factors and key messages, we have yes, to of course begin as soon as possible with the authorization. So as soon as the project is approved, or as soon as you know what you're going to be doing, yeah, to make sure to have that as a priority. To know that surprises can still happen, even if you think you've complied with all of the requirements and the rules, to try to be very comprehensive and still have some buffer time, because further requirements or surprises might come up. Considering also the fact that building expertise, so going after the first pilot with the second one, and then continuing with this and maybe with the similar vehicle or so on, can really help make it easier and quicker. So partners who have been involved in different projects have realized, yes, as we go through this process once more and again, it does become easier and quicker. And then in terms of some of the key messages that I highlighted from what we could collect from pilots, the very good practice of bringing every authority and involved partner to a roundtable, to a meeting early on, discuss the timeline, the different interests and levels of engagement of each party, and really prioritize that initial authorization process. And that, of course, links with other aspects that we'll look later on in terms of a long-term CCAM strategy and so on. and to identify all of the risks beforehand so they can be mitigated, to know the legal requirements and limits of your action. And a key thing is also to early on find out who is your contact point at different entities that need to provide authorization. So to have that communication facility, someone that can be, called, and yeah, sometimes you do have to be quite repetitive and maybe sticky with them. Some partners have said that basically this is the only thing you can do when not receiving a response. You have to be very insistent and not be afraid to really be insistent. And yeah, but knowing who to contact to ask questions, of course, early on. And then in terms of more general recommendations, yes, to try to establish a sustainable innovation agenda with the regulatory bodies, so that the experiences in the cities and that goes to fulfill mobility needs in a city with implementation of autonomous mobility can also be aligned with the process of developing national, regional, local regulatory frameworks, and that both processes can support each other. And then the colleagues from Tartu mentioned that in Estonia they had really quite a simple process, very straightforward, so that this could be considered as a good practice national framework, which we can look further into. Yeah, I think this is all for that phase, which maybe we can pause here and discuss.
Daniel, I have a question on the point, the yellow sticky cloud note that says to bring all stakeholders to the table. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So you think can you say something on whether you should do it immediately in the beginning, or do you need to establish a certain, let's say, critical mass, a good idea of a plan to start involve them? Can you say something on the balance of that?
Daniel, may I answer to it, because I know it's my point?
Absolutely, yes,
Good.
Daniel.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, and definitely put everybody on the table at the beginning, because you have to know who is playing which part and how much time do they need. That was the point Daniel mentioned. We had some problems with one authority to give us the authorization to drive at a specific road, at a national road, and it took more than half a year. And if we knew it beforehand, we had asked them way, way earlier than the other authorities.
But sometimes there can also be some confusion in the beginning because you may not have a clear understanding of the plan. What is it exactly that you want to do? And then
Okay, we have the plan, the others don't have the plan, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, you have to inform them. But at the moment you start to involve them and inform them, you need to have a clear plan of what you want to do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And as you are the one who wants to start the service, you want to establish the pilot project, yeah, you have to give everybody the information they need. And therefore, it can't be as soon enough.
Okay, the sooner the better. That's good.
Sooner the better, absolutely. Thanks, Daniel.
I think Ahmad has a raised hand.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Wolfgang, a question to you.
Sorry, that's my cursor. I'm using Wolfgang's license because
I
it's the one that
know this is later,
avoiding it.
Daniel, so
Yeah.
I thought let me make a joke of it. Question about the vehicle and operation procurement. I can imagine that there's a balance to be made, or a trade-off to be made between procuring a vehicle, a supplier, and procuring a service. Did you see in the lessons learned, which can be done by the same supplier, or by the same the same person or same party, but it could also be that one requires a consortium and the other one doesn't. My question to you, Daniel, is: did you see in the lessons learned any different styles or different choices made in that, and if so, why? Could you perhaps tell something about that?
I think the main message in that sense, and differentiating the two aspects of that need to be procured. Of course, some partners go for a joint process, and that works quite well. But then in the case that you're doing it separately, maybe because you have we are working with let's say the local public transport operator for the operation of the vehicle, or this type of more local conditions. Then the message that I thought we could learn from has to do with considering coordination of the cooperation between those two parties, which can go really well, and you can find that if everything is well clarified since the beginning and the contexts are done, then it's a plus, and you have two different companies working together seamlessly. But then you really need to be there since the beginning, and that is something that can be risked, that maybe there's not enough communication between the two, or support in terms of the vehicle provider training the operator, for example, for drivers and so on. So that really needs to be considered early on.
And did you see any differences when between different pilot sites in that sense, that some they procured a service and others they procured a supplier, or were they all suppliers?
Well, I believe in most cases, the vehicle procurement was the let's say the vehicle procurement already came with a service actually provision considered. I recall for Inverness is the one that I'm thinking about this differentiation that they made. Okay, we were working with a local operator, and that they solved some communication between those two parties at the beginning. But most others, I don't recall that was an issue, and that actually it was the same vehicle provider who was doing the operation of the vehicle basically, and yeah,
Well, except
I don't recall.
for
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Floris.
In Tampere, the provider wasn't able anymore to do the service and maintenance, so they had to do their own repairs. I remember Aki saying that he was going to with all kinds of tools below the vehicle to fix everything, duct tape. So I think that's another edge case, but I think the majority had a service contract in the procurement.
Yeah, exactly, and that was also the other message that I highlighted before, regarding the support for technical repairs, for maintenance, making sure to have that, because they did have that issue, and of course it entails a lot of effort in-house to repair that vehicle.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Oh, all right.
Okay. Moving on. Let me.
Should we move on phase by phase, or should I then do the second strategy and we come back, or
Well, if everybody's okay, I can try and speed up mine, and we can try and stick to the schedule. Or did you? Oh, you still have the other one. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead and do that.
Okay, sure. So the other phase that we analyzed was the second strategy. So first, going quicker here on the mobility service and second strategy. So there is a side in terms of expectation management with the authorities and also with the users in terms of that long-term vision for CCAM and what you're actually testing. That when you compare it to regular bus lines, then maybe it's not gonna look so well, because if you compare maybe driving times or the issues that might come up, and maybe the cost benefit even, then expectations might be too high if such shuttles are to compete already immediately with a regular bus. This was also mentioned in terms of when you have to do repairs, for example, or you have technical issues, then authorities might and other stakeholders might already expect that you have a replacement at hand, or that the service cannot be interrupted. But this is not the case for many of these pilots, where you have only one vehicle, and then you need to make it very clear since the beginning in terms of expectation management. Look, this is a test that has been done, so it might be that service is interrupted, and it's something that it's normal, and we should expect it, basically. And yeah, that was highlighted as a challenge, and as a success factor, counting with a clear policy framework, a clear set of goals and a roadmap for CCAM as an encouragement to, for the planning of these services, and how that can really push forward such efforts, and also the engagement of stakeholders. This was the case in Scotland, where the colleagues in Inverness really felt that overall CAV roadmap was a big support, and pushing forward now with new pilots. And then in terms of more general recommendations, we have ideas of maybe considering a business model where, the hardware as a service type of thing, where these shuttles can be rented more easily. So to really push forward the provision, or the offer provision for rental of shuttle for AV pilots. The fact that when you're discussing CCAM strategies in the long term with local authorities, precisely this exposure to AV pilots, to the technology, to test it, to gathering feedback from the users is what can encourage local authorities to proactively plan for CCAM. So taking these pilots as part of a broader planning process in relation to CCAM strategies. Analyzing also the potential for CCAM to in future allow for more flexible line services with the future fleet, how this could increase accessibility, and then lower travel times. Yeah, and then of course the research agenda around the externalities of deploying autonomous vehicle to really address this in further deployments. For example, in terms of value created, developing such a research and development agenda. Yeah, with prototyping, TRL, product increase ecosystem. Let's see, maybe the next row to go quicker in terms of how users were identified and engaged with. We know the difficulty in terms of attracting users and stakeholders to be active. So in that sense, some of the recommendations were to early on work together with the different companies in the sector around the route, to involve them in the discussion and also in the communication, to use the technology that you have available. So I think this was the case of Aveiro, for example, with that mobile app that they had, and the board roadside, where people could already see, okay, an image of the vehicle where it was, and some additional information, already have access to the survey. So this type of things to really push as much engagement as possible. The topic of additional workshops or additional reserved guided sessions with specific target groups. So some partners have had specific session with students, for example, or other target groups in relation to activities that are taking place in the city. And of course, the involvement of public transport operators, both for the planning and execution phase, but also here in terms of the engagement with users and that integration of different services. And actually, that once you achieve that engagement, you might find, and this was the case with some of the pilots, that there's actually a high level of understanding and interest in CCAM from many of the users. So more than expected, even in terms of the knowledge of the technology. And finally, in terms of the public transport integration, knowing that it really depends on the route and the focus of the pilot, so it might not be the case for every route. So we've seen in cases that maybe we're looking at smaller streets, more pedestrian, more shared space type of thing, then you won't have that integration with public transport lines. But for some others where it wants more of a last mile connection or these type of things, then it is a key aspect of the actual research question to be tested. So that really depends. It's not always the case. The evaluation of integration with other innovative solutions. So with mass, there you go. Yeah, thanks for the correction. Some like this mass app, this is the case in Inverness, or coordinating with public transport operators to make sure that the route that you select is not, creating conflicts and clashes with other services, and that you can really, make the most out of your service. And then connecting lines or specific interest points to attract users and provide alternatives. So that goes into route selection, of course, in terms of prioritizing the user need to make sure that it's well integrated with public transport. And then in terms of recommendation for the future, yes, to prioritize that multimodal concept for future deployments, to know that there's a potential to shift users from using car for daily commutes, but this requires, as said before, that in coordination with public transport operators and with overall authorities in relation to the second strategy. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Other discussion?
Yeah, particularly from the pilots, if there's maybe something that you're thinking about now or something that I might have missed.
I was going to say, feel free to add things to the mural board throughout the workshop.
Absolutely. There's the blue, so the key in the top, the blue icon can also be used like to ask questions that we want to discuss in the workshop actually, so you can do it at any time and we can come back.
Okay. If you don't mind, I will push forward with mine and then we can take a break. Okay. Okay, sorry, I didn't put mine in the mural board yet. I will after. So some of this is overlap of what's been covered, as there's always stakeholder participation involved, but citizen and stakeholder participation. The first of the templates was the stakeholder mapping and engagement. So some of the challenges and weaknesses, some of these perhaps seem a bit miscategorized, but still interesting input and feedback. The cities and companies are partners. They're more partners than stakeholders because they're actually participating, and they have a stake in what comes of this, because they're also working for the employees and the inhabitants of the city to participate in the service. And the distinction was made that Navia is more of an investor. As far as success, consider to increase the depth of stakeholder engagement in the next steps. So this was already covered, and I think it's very important to really involve the stakeholders from the beginning as soon as possible, and it draws out a lot of the potential barriers and issues that could arise. To start with the city authorities and map the stakeholders for your pilot. So yeah, just to include everybody, to take a moment to really think about who those stakeholders are. Other comments were expecting some stakeholders to boycott or resist. There was mention on many of the templates, local shopkeepers, for example. Some of them came around, some of them didn't. Going to move on to the next. If I can. Citizen outreach, public acceptance. Challenges and weaknesses. So if you still have the safety operator on board, he can explain the shuttle to the passengers, which is helpful. I'm not sure why it's a challenge, but it's actually a plus. And to keep the survey short, so you don't have survey fatigue. So success was the R2A survey, that it was thorough enough that you got very detailed answers and feedback, and to identify specific target users for your pilot and consider this in route definition. And this seems really useful. It seems like the younger crowds were very welcoming to it, and people that actually got to experience it, and this was explained to them. It seems like there was, it will come up later, but there was, the negatives seem to have come from social media or people who had not experienced the service. Other comments, engagement with students for educational campaign. That was classes, activities, organizing awareness days for citizens, and a QR code to collect input from users, just to make it easy. And just to comment that people have many questions, to use this questionnaire to provide info and attract participation. So that also goes with the safety operator on board. It seems very useful to open it up to questions for people and to answer their curiosities. Okay. Communication channels, social media. There was mentioned somewhere else that if people don't use it, that can be a challenge, and also just to stay at the top of it. Using existing channels seemed very successful, city resources, and engaging with the press, social media, institutional. So overall, it seemed like using existing channels and working within city channels worked really well. I'm going to move on to evaluation and monitoring. User experience. Challenges were getting surveys after the shuttle experience, and that it depended heavily on the demographics. So students and people around the pilot were positive, while people on the local authority social media were more critical. So this is where it comes into play to really try and draw in, especially since some of these are targeted towards accessibility and the elderly, to inform them. So success factors: to be insistent with requests to answer the survey. Very useful feedback when you can get it. So that was a comment of sticky, but to really be persistent about how you approach that, and maybe the QR code is a good approach. Positive perception. It was a good last mile alternative. So I know there were some comments about aligning the timing of the shuttles, but yeah, the people that actually took the service seemed to really appreciate it. Generated a lot of interest, and good for private actors in the area, the local shops. So stakeholder evaluation, some of these are empty because there were no answers. So maybe lesson learned to, this could also be due to the timing of the shuttles. But the other comments were that it creates interest and attracts people, and it's good for private actors in the area, again. Operational metrics, these seem to generally stick to the R2A guidelines and average speed, passenger numbers, conflicts, etc. Some people mentioned they had a lot of data and a lot of KPIs that were in separate forms. So that would have to be looked at separately. It seems like some really good data was collected. Other conclusions, challenges and weaknesses. So the complex technologies, it was said to really explain this in clear and visual terms. And there were some examples of that throughout the project with some icons and explanatory visuals. And this one has come up often, that 1 year is not enough to start a service and have it running and collect a good amount of data. So this was also where planning and timing and being realistic about it to really get started straight away with a plan, but also to consider how to do this with other projects. There were also some comments as far as aligning this with other EU projects so that there were kind of overlapping projects. Route selection comes up again and again. It's very important, not only for the vehicle operation, but also user engagement, mobility strategy, promotion, etc. And clarity and risk assessment and agreements of responsibility with all actors involved is key. So this is what challenges didn't you expect? What would you have done differently? Some people did not expect negative cooperation by some local stores and restaurants. The internal personnel allocation process should start earlier. Unexpected obstacles, and the biggest one was authorization time, working on the various levels of government and administration. So basically that should be started as soon as possible, and everything else could be handled in the meanwhile. Success factors that the city needs to ensure communication with all departments, and it was already mentioned to have a key contact. And other comments, recommendations were uncertainty factors, which you don't expect, such as grass growing in the road, creating issues for a vehicle. So yes, this kind of all goes back to the route planning, and some of this is in the scalable model toolbox recommendations too, as far as potential barriers to really consider these in the planning phase. If any, so
Can you, thanks Mark for the
yeah.
this quite extensive overview of I think the evaluation aspects of things. Can you maybe go back to the last slide with the opportunities?
Second to last.
Oh, the second to last, yeah.
There you go.
Tom,
This one?
no, one.
No?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
This one? Okay.
We were wondering what negative cooperation means. Because it's...
Well, that was someone's phrasing, but I would assume that's a lack of cooperation, or yeah, I didn't want to twist anyone's words too much. I cleaned up a little bit, but yeah, it did seem to be repeated mention of shopkeepers, and to me, this also reflects back to when you try to implement, cycling lanes and things, that they really fight back. So, and in the end, it tends to be beneficial for everybody in the area to slow things down and offer these sort of services and mobility options. But yeah, but initially people don't like change.
Maybe it also relates to another question. I had something that you mentioned before. So you mentioned some entities that were in a, let's say, in a boycott mode. Can you say something on how to deal with that? Because I think you only made the observation. So expect some stakeholders to boycott or resist the rules. But maybe it would be good if we can have some ideas on how to deal with that from the experiences that we have over the different pilots. Can you say something on that?
I can say something on it, but I would say this is information that should be gathered over time, because basically what would be good to provide them would be information on what actually happens along the route. If it, to benefit business or have no impact on business, because I think people are afraid that they're always afraid if you take away a parking spot or something that they're going to lose all of their customers. So the more evidence you can gather on that to provide in the future, that you can just instantly bring them in the beginning, the stakeholders, and say, listen, here's our experience, it's not going to impact you. That would be my recommendation. And from what I hear, yes, just to bring them in early. But we have information like that from other sorts of mobility, but I'm not absolutely certain it's been gathered, and this is something we should look into.
Okay, so you would say try to involve them also as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And try to come to the table with something that informs them about what's happened in the past, how it's going to impact their business, or what concerns they have, and listen to them.
See, Daniel has his hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to come back to your question, Floris, with one example. There are some restaurants, they have for decades, they have their chairs outside until to a certain point. And now there's a shuttle riding, and the shuttle is programmed, the route is programmed, and if there's some kind of obstacle like a chair, the driver has to go into manual mode because the shuttle can't drive around it. So you go to the restaurant, talk to them and ask them, can you please put your chair 30 centimeters back? And that lasts 1 day, maybe 2. And then you have the same discussion over and over again. And sometimes they are not willing to change their behavior they have done for the last decades. And it's so simple. It's just a very small thing to move a chair, but some people don't want to do it. And that's what we have to deal with, and what others maybe have to deal with too. So just be aware of it.
But if they've done it for decades, then the route, the route, how do you say, planning the route and making the route, creating the shuttle for the first time, should also be taking account the decades of chairs that are standing there.
Yes, but if you are there the first time, and you do it while the restaurant is closed, there is a problem you don't have in mind.
It does show the importance of some people mentioned taking a video of the route, but also to take a video of the route at different times, business hours, nighttime, or whenever the shuttle would potentially operate.
And we can talk here about 1,000 of the small things. And the next project has the thing 1001. Nobody thought of before.
Yeah.
It's a small thing that's going in the way.
But this may also be some gray territory, because I can imagine that some of those chairs are in a position where they are not legally allowed to have them. So you can have customers that, they sit and they go backwards. So you could have a legal point there that, the chair is not allowed to be there. But then you are not really in a cooperative mode. So I can imagine that this is quite tricky. But it also feels wrong to select a different route to avoid that, because you take that status quo. Yeah.
Does it interfere with other traffic?
Probably not, because you can drive manually, as you said. So I assume that the shuttle has a larger safety envelope, so it is impeded earlier by those chairs, and you as a manual driver would just drive past it.
Yeah, but we want to get rid of the manual driver. We want to drive fully autonomously, but that's the next step. Until the safety operator is out of the shuttle, the technique has to advance so the shuttle can drive around small obstacles. Yeah, and you to be honest, you don't want to complain with the restaurant about 10 centimeters of a chair. That's the small things. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you for bringing it up. But for the future. We're gonna just move on to a real quick update from Daniel about outstanding templates, and then take a break. Daniel's here. Okay.
Sorry, what are we doing? I couldn't understand.
It was just a really brief update, so we know which templates we're still missing.
Okay.
And then on to the break.
Yes. Well, in terms of the collection of input from pilots, you can see all the templates in the evaluation folder. We had a meeting with Trikala this morning and are compiling a first version of this, which we will be sending our colleagues in Trikala for completion today. And then we still have also pending from some other partners who are just starting with their operation. So I see Francesco is on the call. Please also remember to fill that in for Reggio Emilia. For Barcelona, we're also still missing the input. I'll make sure to remind Christian about it. Let me see. I think those are the only ones missing this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, those are the only ones missing. And well, of course, for Aveiro, I don't know whether you have already compiled the sections of the operation of the vehicle, because I know you had done the preparation and planning and that stuff before the operation took place. If you've already done it, then that's great. Thanks. Otherwise, make sure to add your input. Thanks.
Yes, we already completed the lessons learned after the final workshop. I don't know if it is anything missing, but yeah, that's all.
Super. No, that's great then. Thanks, Eva. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, 10 minutes, and we will resume a little more interactive session of the workshop. We're going to have a quick summary of the synergies between the other deliverables, and then we'll go to the Miro board. Thank you. See you in 10 minutes. We'll wait a few minutes for Forrest and Tom to come back then next. Could you let me know when you see them come in? Because I can only see you. Can Flores and Tom come?
We are here.
Ah, okay, I can't see anybody. Just let me know when you're ready or take the screen.
Yeah, I'll take the screen. Like, so, yeah, discussing the first deliverable D1 mass stock taking report. I sent out, I think, to EPF and Daniel, 0.9 version 2 days ago. And I think in the beginning it felt challenging to really link the outcome of a stock taking exercise to what our Ride2Autonomy pilot sites have done. But I stumbled upon, I think, the common denominator, which is basically that the first ML solution of things is something that is both in mass very important, and I think is a perfectly suited application for shuttle services. So that's why I put in, how do you say, italic, the deployment of AV shuttle services as a first mile solution can be perfectly be integrated in mass systems. But what I found out is that there are several conditions, several challenges which need to be overcome before we can integrate that. And the first one is address a clear mobility need. It's only, well, mass works only if people really can go from A to B with the minimization of their walking or first and last mile trip part. And I think shuttle services can really jump into that gap. Albeit it should, well, be fast enough, drive frequently enough, maybe even be on demand. So there are lots of ifs and buts, but in a sense, the two can well, complement each other and benefit both. Yeah, in some ways, for Inverness, we have the Go High applications. I don't think they're here now, but I'm really curious to have the latest status update on how the shuttle service there is integrated in the mass application. So I'll be sure to check up on that and add it to the deliverable. I've added a couple of conditions for market uptake for mass as a whole, but well, it's not per se related now in this case to the AV shuttles. I think the bullets, these 5 are the most important ones for now. And what I really try to do is extract from all the pilot sites what are the main lessons learned there regarding mobility as a service. And I think that all sites and cities have included some mobility plans in their, well, mobility vision regarding mobility as a service to really make the connectivity as good as possible and provide enough options for travelers. However, there's obviously also a high variety in the level of readiness that they have regarding mobility as a service. And it's not per se only limited to the number of modalities that there are present in a city, but also the integration of modalities and the possibility to book, plan, and pay for your trip in one application or well, integrate all those modalities in one place. Therefore, it's, I think, highly valuable to learn from each other. Well, one way by doing is through this deliverable, I would say, but also keep track of what is going on in other cities and try to mimic the good and the best practices. Yeah, not only from this project, but also from past and future experiences. I would say, well, it's an open door, but important to keep exploring options to integrate shuttle services in MaaS applications. So if you're starting a new service, mobility service, think about what's already there regarding MaaS. Is there an application or platform, and can you integrate your service within those systems and platforms? Yeah, to make the platform in itself better and more comprehensive, but also to have your service uptake increase. And always keep designing from a user-centric perspective, but that's in principle the major point of MaaS. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, the key outcomes of the MaaS stock-taking report in relation to the Ride2Autonomy sites and what can be learned from each other. So I think those, yeah, that's it for the MaaS report. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. As I said, there is a 0.9 version. I'll be finalizing the final version, I think, in the next week, and then you're all welcome to read these points, but then in a more not summary way.
No questions? Because in that case, we'll go to the yeah.
Short comment. I think maybe also thinking about the connection between the MaaS stock-taking report and the conclusions from the project and for different pilots. One, you know, in addition to what you already mentioned, Floris, one aspect that we could highlight is the analysis that you did through the MaaS stock-taking report in terms of the current status and then comparing across sites, how that can contribute to the results analysis of the pilots and sort of to that second strategic planning process that could follow such an exercise. So basically to be provided back to sites as information going forward. Hey, here's how you compare in terms of MaaS integration or public transport integration with other sites. Here are the recommendations. And in relation to what you wanted to test, you know, what your research questions were, there's room for improvement here and here, something like that, you know.
There is, I think, in the deliverable now a section which well entails that what you mentioned.
Exactly.
But I didn't incorporate it here, but it's included. Yeah.
But this is what we can integrate into the lessons learned guide, basically, that this is providing that input, you know, as part of the lessons learned through the project, basically. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, then we'll go to the educational campaign guidelines part. Floris and I will rework on the draft report that we circulated, and we will reimagine it, and we've come up with a different structure after some comments that we received from you. But basically, the two important elements of the report is that we take a lot of lessons learned, so that is basically input and results from what you all have done at different pilot sites, and we assume that this was not done by any guideline that was available from our project, but we want to derive such a guideline based on the lessons learned and the information that we gathered. But also from the other projects, so from Show and Avenue that has just finished, and from some desk research. And so basically we are providing a set of guidelines for future educational campaigns that can build on the collective knowledge and experience that we are accumulating, I would say, in Europe. And of course, well, one of the conclusions is that the context of the pilots, of course, is very relevant. And so there is no one size fits all solution. So if I jump to the, let's say the conclusions part first, so the context is relevant. So it depends on the actual target group, the size of the fleet, the type of the vehicles that you use, the actual location, the cultural aspects, the duration of the pilot, the operational design domain, and the mobility challenge in mind. So it really matters whether you are providing a service to bring the elderly to a community center, or you bring tourists to a tourist destination. It really differs. But from the guidelines that we have distilled, you could see that as a sort of a selection menu where you start at the beginning and you take some steps and you see what is applicable for you and the goal that you have in mind. So starting at 1, you have to define the stakeholders and end users with the application that you have in mind. In order to reach them, you have to choose your communication channels and tools. And of course, you have to think about the message that you want to get across. You have to actively involve and motivate end users to get them to use the service that you have in mind. You have to maybe, in order to do so, you have to actually demonstrate it. Of course, you can communicate about it and tell them about it and have a press release, but it's always more powerful to actually show it. And you can, of course, organize a launch event or involve the local press. And in the end, you also have to evaluate your campaign. So you have to look back on well, seeing how efficient it was. The sentiment analysis, Floris, you talked about that. We have done some campaigns where it is important to get some feedback on how users actually valued the service, and they may have recommendations based on either positive or negative responses or both. And I think we should go one step beyond it, because, okay, you can evaluate your campaign, but I think it is important that we also publish our lessons learned and contribute to the collective knowledge and experience that I mentioned before in the European context. And with that in mind, I think we should, for instance, publish that at the Connected and Automated Driving website that the Commission has launched in previous projects and is currently being maintained by the FAIN project. I think these are the steps that we propose and that we have distilled on the results and the experiences from the various pilots. Of course, we did put there a what did we miss. So maybe in terms of the context of the pilot, you may have some elements that you think are missing for the moment. And if that's the case, please speak up now or hold your voice forever. No.
I have 2 things that could be proposed for the guidelines, since we've talked about the barriers of the shopkeepers to actively include people along the route that own business, offer them a free ride, offer them an educational session and a free ride, and in context to consider the mobility alternatives. If you're traveling a route to see, you know, what other bus service, if they're in the middle of nowhere, you know, who you're serving, and if the timeline doesn't match what they're going to do, just competition speaking.
We lost you for about 5 seconds.
Oh, just as far as assessing the competition and the alternatives in mobility in the context. just to
So
gain ridership. If you're serving, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you've kind of got a monopoly on accessibility, helping people. But if they can walk 10 meters over and take a bus, it's something to consider, I think.
Yeah, so I think this is implicitly in the steps 1, 2, and 4. So you involve this, but maybe it would be good to explicitly mention this, because if I phrase it correctly, you say that it is important to involve potential opponents. Maybe opponents is too strong of a voice, but maybe blockers or skeptics, and it helps to demonstrate what you have in mind, involve them, and explore alternatives so that you.
Yeah, you could say stakeholders along the route, businesses and stakeholders along the route. Yeah, just to avoid barriers, to try and.
Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly make sure that we include that as a let's say a further detailed step of involving all stakeholders, where we explicitly mention all parties along the route.
Yeah.
I think you wanted to mention 2 things. Or was this it?
The other one was just assessing the competition along the route.
And so assessing the competition in alternative forms of transportation.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. If there's no one else with a question or comment, I think we can move to the next deliverable, the toolbox.
On to Lux Mobility.
Yeah. Hello everyone. Let me share my screen. Do you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we have noted down some key findings and challenges for the scalable model toolbox. So starting with the positive things, that how it's going to be helpful for the future projects. Yeah. So like providing efficient solutions to overcome the pilot challenges, as this toolbox is already, if you see the scenarios and recommendations, they have covers all the aspects from the user perspective, like safety and reliability, security, I mean the cost efficiency, and how we can integrate safely integrate with the public transport modes and the mobility as a services. So it covers all the aspects. So that is a positive thing, and the this toolbox will also be helpful for the future CCAM projects at the different scales and for the different European project. For the different target users. And another thing is, it provides a solution for the all the target user groups. And we also have some faces some challenges like lack of coordination between stakeholders, and we also have limitations in terms of design and budget constraint. And we also thought about, like, we should arrange recommendations in a way that from the perspective and skills for the partners, like which partners has a good skill in the expertise. Based on the expertise, we should distribute the recommendations, because right now we I mean, otherwise we would not have the good outcome for the recommendations. And the last, I was also I mean, this toolbox can also be link from the other European projects, like some other projects has also the same toolbox, not the same, but for the autonomous vehicles, so we can mutualize them and we can link into them for the better aspects from the users. And yeah, we have key takeaways like cross learning is always important from the all partners and stakeholders, and for to getting the more realistic recommendations. And yeah, so the good thing about it's catering this toolbox, it is catering a different perspective for the, I mean, it covers all the groups like vulnerable groups, elderly and for children's. So we can say that it can be this project can be set a good example to increase the ridership, daily ridership for the users. I think that's it for the learnings from scalable model toolbox. You have, I mean, if you can add your viewpoints, that would be good. Like what guys, I mean, what you guys find, how is it useful? I mean, the recommendations, or it should be more focusing on the technical parameters or any other aspects. The suggestions would also be grateful.
No comments?
Yeah, if you have any comments or suggestions.
You had a PowerPoint you showed me too. Did you want to provide any updates?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's almost the same. I put all the points in the my robot.
Okay.
So
It's your choice if you want to update people and push them to wrap this up. I'll leave it to you.
and I apologize if you feel harsh sending reminders because we really want to present the all recommendations by the, I mean, for the final conference. So it would be good. We will receive really good inputs if we have all the, I mean, the completely, then we only can put the 30 of them in the toolbox. So
You don't have to name and shame, but how many more do you need?
I think I received today from Daniel too. So right now, as of now, we have 18 and still we need 12 more.
Okay.
May I suggest
least-
something like in this Miro board there are lots of well, yellow clouds in a recommendation style, well, lessons learned, but also we can
Yeah.
some of them can be transformed into a recommendation perhaps, and they are maybe more easy to write for all of us in this call than some of the recommendations in the Excel sheet, which are, well, feel a bit difficult sometimes to start and then grasp what it means. So maybe that would be an option to ease the process of finding the last 12.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. I mean, I think I already told many times, like we can always, I mean, you are free to change anything in the spreadsheet. So yeah, I think mark has also changed, but yeah, it's no problem. We can replace the recommendations by your expertise. So yeah, it's a good idea. I can see the lot of things. I mean, lot of good suggestions in my robot for the different pilot sites. So it would be good if we can implicate into the toolbox.
Okay, we just have one last thing on the agenda, planning for the next steps in writing the lessons learned guide.
If I may,
Please.
yeah, thanks, Mark. So the idea for the lessons learned guide and you know what we've been discussing is to follow the same structures we have now in this Miro, and which we've been collecting the input from pilots also. So as you all know, we have a limited length and in terms of content to be able to translate it into all languages. But basically, we should have 2 to 3 pages per phase, basically going through the main messages, describing what the challenges are and what potential solutions and good practices we've found in relation to procuring and planning AV pilots, and then preparing and planning, then running the procurement and legal requirements, and then so on with each of the phases that we have there, the big rows in the table. So I think in terms of the getting the input that we have now in the Miro into the document, we should have a follow-up meeting, just the core partners involved, as we did early this week in the preparation of this, or last week was it, in the preparation of this workshop. But something that we can already discuss also is how to highlight these 3 key outputs, these main deliverables. What I wanted to suggest is that we include like a you know, a highlight box in the guide, maybe 1 page size per deliverable or so, where it can be described what it is and what type of guidance it provides, why it's helpful, a few images and description of how to use it, and the link, of course, to it. So what we want to make sure is that this lessons learned guide is really a way into the project results, something that can serve to not only summarize what we found, but also promote the other more comprehensive and more detailed deliverables. So links to each of these guides, of course, should also be there. So from the side of you know, MapTM and Luxability, what do you think about this? You know, having 1 pager per guide where we can highlight what it is and the main, you know, support elements in each of those. Would you be able to provide that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so we'll build it into the template. There's already actually a template available in the SharePoint. I'm adjusting the structure a bit, and we'll set up a new meeting among knowledge partners to discuss, you know, getting these conclusions into writing. But yes, this is something that we'll basically need to advance in the next week to have it ready by the final conference.
We can discuss in the future, but how do you picture putting the cities in? Do you see it being aligned by topic of the template as we've done today, or to also break it down and have a brief description of each city and pilot, kind of an overview, context. I know we're looking for a narrative,
Yeah.
and there are differences in the cities and the context. So,
But that's a good idea. True that we should have, let's say, as a different chapter, short description of each pilot. Not as detailed as we would have, let's say, now on the website, but at least the main information so that we can inform about which the pilots were and what type of service was tested and main findings. Yeah, I'll make sure to include that into the template, but that would be not referring to the lessons learned by each pilot, but just like the main overall description of the pilot. And then what entails the lessons learned, we should indeed follow the structure that we saw today with the narrative of how the process would go by, step by step. And very easy to understand, very much sort of highlighting what the main challenges that need to be faced are, and then a few of the solutions that can be recommended, a few of the success factors and key considerations, basically. We want to make it very visual, so the call to all of the pilots involved is please upload to the SharePoint there in the folder that is allocated to you in the pilot monitoring folder. Upload every photo that you might have, information that might be useful to show in this guide. So not only of the pilot, but maybe if you had engagement activities, if you had photos from the launch event, etc. This is of course really useful for the guide because we want to make it very attractive, very visual. Yeah, and then for the actual sections of the guide that will be highlighting each pilot, we do have let's say a baseline description of each pilot, the ones that we have in the website, but also on the Inception report. This of course needs to be updated, but this is something we can put together and have it reviewed and complemented by each pilot partner.
yeah, we're updating the website again, but I would ask all of you to please take a look at it, maybe give it 2 days. We have some new information, but there's a city's overview, which is the basic facts. And we've gotten a few updates coming from that. And then we've got the pilot site websites. And I don't really picture putting the picture of the routes in the guide, but we could condense that information.
Yep.
I started a document that we could add to. This is just the summaries of the templates broken down. This obviously wouldn't be something we would present. It's not presentable, but it's just to gather all the information in one document. And it's just color coded so that we can keep track of the different sections. If you want to use that, that's in the workshop folder. And I want to take a moment to remind everybody to please follow the R2A Twitter. We need some followers.
Yeah, and promote it. And
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. And thank you for highlighting there also the registration for the panel conference. Please, if you have not yet registered for the event, do so immediately. We expect attendance by all partners. If you cannot attend, please let us know. Basically today, latest tomorrow. We are not expecting to have remote speakers. There will be a stream available so you can follow, just listen in on the final conference, but you wouldn't want to go through the whole hassle and depending on the internet connection of having someone connect and speak in a hybrid type of meeting. So yeah, please register and let us know if you cannot make it. Of course, the agenda is available on the SharePoint for a while now, and if you have any questions in terms of what expected from your presentation and so on, also just contact me anytime. Right.
I believe that's all.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, all the materials are in the SharePoint. If you want to look at the pilot templates or add anything directly, feel free.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
nice day.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Next weekend.